He humiliated me in front of everyone, then learned who I really was. So, last Saturday night, I learned something about my family that I probably should have seen coming years ago. And it all started with a chair. Yeah, a stupid chair. I wasn't supposed to be the center of attention at my sister's engagement party. I rarely am. I'm the oldest, the fixer, the one who shows up early to set up tables and stays late to stack them. Nobody ever asks if I'm tired. Nobody ever wonders if I want to sit down. They just assume I will. And honestly, I did too, until that night. I should probably introduce myself. My name's Rachel Moore. I'm 33, born and raised in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio, the kind of place where everybody knows your grandmother's biscuit recipe and your father's worst decisions. I work at a regional hardware distribution warehouse, moving pallets and scanning inventory all day. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills, and it keeps me out of trouble. I rent a tiny duplex near a railroad track where the trains pass by at 4:17 a.m. like clockwork. The walls shake a little, but it feels like home to me. Quiet, predictable, mine. My sister Lacey is the opposite of predictable. She's 26, bubbly, pretty in that Instagram-filtered way, and people fall over themselves trying to impress her. And by people, I mean my mother. My mom worships Lacey like the girl cures cancer in her free time. Meanwhile, I'm the designated responsible one, which is code for the one we guilt into doing everything. I used to joke about it. Lately, it just feels heavy. Anyway, the engagement party was held in the banquet room of a country club that Tyler's uncle manages. Tyler, my sister's fiancé, is the type of guy who calls cashiers sweetheart and thinks sarcasm is a personality. He's got that smirk men get when they believe they'll never face consequences. I tolerated him for Lacey's sake, but I never really liked the way he looked at me, like I was a stray dog that wandered into the wrong yard. The room was loud, too loud. A DJ blasting throwback hits, clinking glasses, bursts of laughter that didn't quite reach my table. I wore a dress I found on clearance after Christmas, the kind that still had shoulder pads for some reason. Mom said I looked professional, which is Ohio code for not pretty enough to steal attention. I'd been seated near a speaker that rattled the floor every time the bass hit. Maybe it was intentional, maybe not. I didn't care enough to ask. When the toast started, I was halfway through a lukewarm Shirley Temple, trying to ignore the sugar crash I knew was coming. A couple of Tyler's groomsmen got up, told stories about his wild side, which basically meant he once jumped into a lake in February because someone dared him. Everyone laughed like it was the peak of human achievement. Then someone tapped a glass for attention, and I scooted my chair an inch closer to the table to get out of someone's way. Except the chair wasn't there anymore. I felt the drop before I registered the movement, my body tipping, the air rushing past, the cold floor slamming into my hip. A gasp rippled across the room, followed by something worse. Laughter. That sharp, uncomfortable kind that cuts deeper than yelling ever could. I didn't need to look to know who did it. I heard Tyler's voice above the noise, dripping with fake innocence. "Whoa, careful there, Rachel. Didn't realize we needed seatbelts tonight," he said into the microphone, like it was the funniest thing he'd ever come up with. Someone snorted. Someone whispered. Someone pointed. My face flamed hot. For a second, it felt like I was 8 years old again, tripping over my own feet at a school assembly while kids giggled around me. My body wanted to freeze. My pride told me to run. But something else inside me, something tired and stubborn, made me do neither. I stood up slowly, brushed off my dress, and put the chair back exactly where it belonged. I didn't give Tyler the meltdown he wanted. I just sat back down and folded my hands in my lap. That's when I noticed him. A tall man in a charcoal suit at the head table, watching me with an expression that didn't match the room. Not amusement, not pity, recognition. He stood up, walked straight toward my table while everyone else was still whispering about my fall. When he reached me, he said something I'll never forget. "Are you Rachel Moore?" His voice was low, confused, almost startled. I blinked because I had no idea who he was. Before I could respond, Tyler jumped in, laughing too loudly. "Dad, relax. It was a joke. She's fine." "Dad? That was Tyler's father?" The man, tall, serious, expensive watch, sharp jaw, completely ignored his son. "Rachel," he said again, "we need to talk, outside." The entire room went silent. Even the DJ seemed to sense something was off and lowered the music. My mother's eyes widened like she'd been caught shoplifting. Lacey stopped mid-sip, her smile collapsing. Someone whispered, "What's going on?" And honestly, I was wondering the exact same thing. Because here's the thing I haven't mentioned yet. Something happened the day before. Something I thought was just a weird glitch or maybe a bank mistake. But when this man, Tyler's father, looked at me like he knew something I didn't, I felt my stomach twist. I didn't realize it then, but this was the moment everything cracked open. The fall, the laughter, the humiliation. That was just the surface. The real story was buried underneath, waiting to detonate. And he already knew. If I'm being honest, the whole thing with Tyler's dad wouldn't have hit me so hard if it weren't for what happened the day before. Friday morning started like any other. Me clocking in at the warehouse at 6:58 a.m. with a half-finished gas station coffee, nodding at the same 3 coworkers who pretend we're not all exhausted. I was halfway through unloading a pallet of pressure washers when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost ignored it. Nobody calls me this early except my mom, and she only calls when she needs something. But the screen said it was my bank. I stepped outside into the cold Ohio air, the kind that tastes like metal in the winter, and answered. The woman on the line introduced herself so politely, I knew immediately something was wrong. Banks don't use their customer service voice unless they're about to ruin your day. "Ms. Moore," she said, "we're calling to verify an application for a personal loan in the amount of—" I didn't hear the number. My brain froze somewhere between verify and personal loan. I told her, as calmly as I could, that I hadn't applied for anything. I don't take out loans. I barely trust myself with store credit cards after that one time Target suckered me with a 20% off coupon. She apologized, said she'd flagged the application as suspicious, and asked if anyone else might have used my information. The silence that followed her question was embarrassingly loud. I didn't want to say yes. I didn't want to admit that, in my family, boundaries are more of a loose suggestion than a rule. But something in her voice, kind, patient, trying to help, made me say it. "Maybe," I whispered, "I'm not sure." After we hung up, I just stood there staring at the parking lot. You know that weird feeling when you're both numb and panicking at the same time? Like your brain is screaming but your body refuses to react? That was me. I should have gone straight to the police or the bank in person or anything really. But I didn't. Instead, I walked back inside, finished unloading the pallet, and tried to pretend everything was normal. Because that's what I do. I keep the peace. I don't make noise. I've been trained my whole life to swallow everything down until it sits like a stone in my chest. Around lunchtime, my supervisor, Doug, walked by and tossed one of his signature half-jokes my way. "You look like someone stole your truck," he said, laughing. I forced a smile, even though the closest thing I have to a truck is a 2007 Corolla with a dent I never bothered fixing. Doug used to tease me about being too serious, so I've learned to fake lightness when I need to. Nobody likes a downer, right? When my shift ended, I didn't go home right away. I stopped by this little coffee shop near the tracks, the Copper Mug. It's been there since before I was born, run by a retired couple who knows everyone's order better than their kids' birthdays. I sat in the corner with my notebook, the one I've filled with every bill I've paid for my family over the years. Rent I covered when my mom was between jobs. Textbooks I bought for Lacey in college. The car repair I paid for when Dad blew out his transmission hauling scrap metal without oil. I wrote it all down because the only person who keeps track of what I do is me. I opened the notebook and stared at the long list of dates and amounts. Some big, some tiny, all forgotten by everyone except me. It wasn't about the money. It was the pattern, the expectation. Every time I helped, they said, "We'll pay you back." And every time I knew they wouldn't. I accepted it as the price of being the dependable one. But a loan application in my name? That was something different. That was a line being crossed, stomped on, and spit on. While I was still sitting there, the barista I see every morning, Harper, brought over a muffin on the house and just said, "You look like you need something sweet today." I swear, that tiny act of kindness nearly broke me. It's always the smallest things that do it. I thanked her, made some dumb joke to cover the crack in my voice, and after she walked away, I finally let myself feel the fear I'd been ignoring. I decided to print out every bank alert, every message, every suspicious email I'd gotten. Not because I had a plan, but because deep down, something told me I might need proof soon. Proof of what? I didn't know yet. But I've learned the hard way that people believe paper more than they believe pain. On my way home, I called my mom just to test the waters. I asked if she or Lacey had needed anything money-wise recently. Her voice snapped back faster than I expected. "Rachel, don't start," she said. "Your sister's wedding is stressful enough. Don't make drama." I wasn't accusing her. I wasn't accusing anyone. But the defensive tone hit me like a slap. It was the same tone she used when Lacey totaled her car in high school, and I dared to ask why she was driving without insurance. Or the time Dad pawned his tools and she blamed me for making him feel bad about it. Sometimes I think my family doesn't actually want help. They want silence. They want me to do everything without ever acknowledging that I do everything. When I got home, my neighbor Mr. Lennox was on his porch with his old beagle, Millie. He waved and said, "You look like someone stole your paycheck." I laughed and told him it was just a long week. He doesn't know much about me, but he always says, "If you ever need backup, kid, I was a Marine, and I still got one good left hook." He says it jokingly, but for some reason that day, it made me feel less alone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the bank call in my head. I kept wondering if this was just one loan or if something else was waiting for me. I scrolled through old emails just to check, and my stomach dropped when I noticed a notification I must have ignored weeks ago. Someone tried to reset the password to my credit monitoring account. I had brushed it off as spam back then, but now it felt connected. By 2 a.m., I had my entire kitchen table covered in papers, printouts, receipts, the notebook, everything. I wasn't angry yet. Anger has always been a delayed reaction for me. What I felt was something colder, a quiet determination, a little voice in my head saying, "Not this time, not again." I thought about the party the next day, how I'd probably show up, smile, take photos, maybe give a toast about love or whatever. Everyone would be too distracted by champagne to notice me blinking back stress. That's how it always went. But then I thought about Tyler. The smirk, the comments, the way he looked at me like I was disposable. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't want to be quiet. I didn't want to be the girl who swallowed everything until she choked on it. I didn't realize it then, but that tiny shift, barely a whisper in my own head, was the first step toward everything that happened at the engagement party, toward the fall, toward Tyler's dad recognizing my name, toward the truth cracking open like a busted pipe, and toward the part of myself I'd been ignoring for years finally standing up. I swear, I could feel the shift in my chest the moment I walked into Lacey's engagement party. You ever step into a room and immediately know something's off? Like the air is just too tight, too sweet, too fake? That was the vibe. The place was one of those rented banquet halls that looks fancy on Instagram, but smells like lemon cleaner and leftover weddings. Fairy lights everywhere, a dessert table so dramatic it looked sponsored, and a DJ who played the same remix of Shut Up and Dance 3 times before dinner. I showed up in the one decent navy dress I own, the one with the tiny tear I stitched myself because tailors cost money I don't have. I kept repeating to myself, "Be normal, blend in, don't think about the bank call." But of course, the universe doesn't care about pep talks. The second I walked in, Tyler caught my eye. He was holding a beer bottle like it was an accessory, laughing too loudly, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. And he smirked at me, this tiny, mocking smirk, like he already had a punchline ready at my expense. "Rachel," he called, stretching the name like it annoyed him to say it. "Didn't think you'd make it." I smiled the way customer service workers do, polite, soulless, slightly dead inside. "Yup, here I am." He leaned closer than necessary, the smell of expensive cologne mixed with arrogance hitting me in the face. "Try not to look too stressed tonight, okay? This is supposed to be fun." I swear, for a split second, I actually imagined shoving the cupcake tower straight into his smug jaw. But I just nodded and walked away because if there's one thing I've mastered in life, it's staying quiet until it matters. Dinner started, speeches began, and I sat there trying to keep my breathing even. I thought I could power through the night without incident. I thought I could pretend. But Tyler had other plans. During the photo-taking part, the part where everyone fake laughs like they actually enjoy each other, he decided I wasn't smiling enough. So he walked behind me, grabbed my chair with both hands, and yanked it out just as I was sitting down. I fell, hard. The whole room gasped, then chuckled, then turned it into a full-blown laugh track like this was some slapstick comedy special. My elbow hit the floor so fast I saw stars. Someone muttered, "Damn," like I had ruined the vibe by failing to fall gracefully. And Tyler, God, he held up his hands like a magician revealing a rabbit. "Careful there, Rach. Floors are slippery when you're stressed." It was the way he said stressed, like it was an insult. Like stress was a personal failing. Like he hadn't been eating the benefits of my stress for months. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even move for a second. I just stared at the floor and felt this cold, still anger rise inside me, the kind that's too quiet to ignore. When I finally stood up, I felt every pair of eyes on me. Lacey was laughing behind her hand, not because it was funny, but because she hates discomfort and would rather look cruel than awkward. My mom was wide-eyed, torn between acting outraged and enjoying the drama. I sat back down slowly, straightened my dress, pressed my palms flat on the table, and told myself, not tonight, not again, not like this. And that's when I saw him. At the head table, a man, older, composed, wearing a charcoal suit and an expression that didn't match the chaos, was staring straight at me. Not amused, not confused, something else. Recognition. I didn't know him, but I recognized the last name on his place card. Foster, Tyler's father. The CEO of Foster Landmark Holdings. A man whose signature I had seen on the fraud alert email from my bank less than 48 hours earlier. He stood up slowly, like his bones were made of disappointment, walked around the table, and headed directly toward me. The room got so quiet the DJ actually lowered the volume mid-song. He stopped beside me and said, "Ms. Moore, I need to speak with you." Tyler looked like someone had unplugged his brain. "Dad, chill, she's fine, it was a joke." But his dad didn't even acknowledge him. His eyes stayed on me, steady, sharp, unsettlingly gentle. "Will you step outside with me for a moment?" Now everyone was staring, like this was the part where the background music would swell, or the camera would zoom in for dramatic effect. My mom whispered, "Rachel, what did you do?" like she already assumed it was my fault. I followed Mr. Foster into the hallway. My hands were trembling, but not from fear, from adrenaline. He closed the door softly behind us and turned to me. "You're the woman from the flagged loan application," he said, voice low but steady. I recognized the name immediately. I've been reviewing the case myself. I felt like the floor tilted underneath me. "So, it was real. He really did it?" Mr. Foster nodded, jaw tightening with shame he wasn't even trying to hide. "He used your information, without consent, and this isn't the first time he's done something like this." I didn't know whether to scream or laugh or collapse. Instead, I whispered, "Why are you telling me this?" He exhaled slowly, like he was releasing years of regret. "Because tonight, you were humiliated for sport, and my son has humiliated far too many people already." It was the way he said my son, heavy, honest, almost mournful. Then he met my eyes and said, "If you'll allow it, I'd like to address this. Not tomorrow, not next week, now." I didn't know what address meant exactly, but something in me, the part that's always swallowed every wound, every insult, every guilt trip, finally said, "Yes." We walked back in together, and if the room was tense before, now it was suffocating. Tyler straightened in his chair like he was preparing for a photo shoot. His dad stepped forward, placed one hand firmly on his shoulder, and said in a voice that cut through every whisper, "You will apologize to Rachel now." And for the first time in the entire evening, Tyler didn't have a smirk. His face drained of color, his jaw clenched like a toddler being told to eat vegetables. He muttered, "Sorry," without looking at me. Mr. Foster's voice sharpened. "Look at her." Tyler lifted his eyes, and I swear, the humiliation on his face almost felt like justice. Almost. I'm sorry, he said again. But his dad wasn't done. Now, he continued, we will discuss the loan you attempted to open under her name. Every sound died. Someone dropped a fork. A bridesmaid gasped so loudly she choked on her champagne. My mom's hand flew to her chest. Lacey shot up from her chair like someone had set her dress on fire. What loan? She squeaked. Tyler stammered, Dad, what are you doing? His father answered without breaking eye contact. Telling the truth. Something you should have done a long time ago. The room imploded into whispers. Tyler grabbed his dad's arm. Can we not do this right now? No, Mr. Foster said. We're doing it right now. You used her identity. You risked her credit, her safety, her future. And you laughed when she hit the floor. He stepped away from his son and, to my shock, positioned himself beside me. Not protectively, respectfully, like he was taking a stand with me. Lacey muttered, Rachel, is this true? I reached into my purse, pulled out the stack of printed documents, the flagged alerts, the attempted logins, the email from the fraud department, and placed them on the table. It's all here. Lacey stared like the papers were written in a language she couldn't understand. My mom whispered, Why would he do something like that? But her voice trembled like she already feared the answer. Tyler said nothing. His silence was so loud it echoed. And standing there, watching the cracks spread through the room like a dropped mirror, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Not revenge. Not smugness. Just the quiet, powerful feeling of finally being seen. Finally being believed. Finally not being the one who had to hold everything together. And that right there, that was the moment everything snapped. The morning after the party felt unreal, like waking up after a storm but still hearing thunder somewhere far off. My phone lit up non-stop. Missed calls, long texts, half-angry, half-pleading voicemails. I didn't answer a single one. I just sat at my tiny kitchen table, drinking burnt coffee from a chipped mug, staring out the window at my quiet street in West Elmwood. Dogs being walked, kids waiting for the school bus, neighbors scraping frost off car windshields. The world moved normally while my life felt like a deck of cards someone had thrown into the air. Lacey tried calling 8 times before switching to voice notes. The first was frantic. Rachel, what the hell was that? Then defensive. You could have pulled me aside, you know. Then desperate. I'm sure there's a way to fix this. And finally, the classic Moore family hit single. Don't ruin things for us. I didn't reply. I didn't trust my temper yet. Instead, I opened my notebook, the one I started years ago where I logged every emergency request, every "can you spot me till Friday," every unpaid promise. Page after page of me playing Atlas for a family that never noticed the weight on my back. A part of me felt mean for even flipping through it. Another part felt alive for the first time, like I'd finally stopped pretending the burden didn't exist. Around noon, my mom showed up at my doorstep unannounced. I recognized her knock. 3 fast taps, 1 slow. The same knock she used when I was a kid and forgot my house key after school. But I didn't open the door this time. Instead, I texted her. Mom, please don't drop by without warning, not right now. Her reply came in less than 30 seconds. We're family. Family doesn't shut people out. I stared at that message for a long time, feeling the familiar sting. Because in my family, family usually meant Rachel fixes everything. I set my phone face down and waited until her footsteps faded off the porch. Later that afternoon, the real shock came. An email from Mr. Foster. Subject, update. Just 1 line. I've contacted legal. My stomach clenched. I read it 3 times, trying to make sure I hadn't misinterpreted it. Legal. As in lawyers. As in actual consequences. I had expected him to scold Tyler, maybe freeze a few accounts, maybe give him some millionaire dad punishment like restricting access to some trust fund. But legal? That meant it wasn't just about me anymore. This time, Tyler had crossed a line big enough to set his whole future on fire. I didn't respond to the email. I didn't know what to say. Gratitude felt awkward. Sympathy felt misplaced. And honestly, relief felt too small for what I was experiencing. It was something bigger, something deeper, like someone had finally closed a giant door I'd been holding shut my entire life. The next day, while I was at work scanning pallets in the warehouse, my phone buzzed again. It was Lacey. This time she sent a picture, a crumpled tissue in her hand, mascara streaks on her face. She wrote, I ended the engagement. No emojis, no drama, just a sentence that probably cost her a piece of herself to type. I stepped outside into the cold Ohio air, exhaling a shaky breath. "Are you okay?" I texted back. After a long pause, she answered, "No, but I will be." For the first time in months, I felt something soften toward her. Maybe it was overdue. Maybe it was too late. But pain changes people. And I could hear the truth in her message. That night, Mom called. I debated ignoring it, but something in me whispered, "Just pick up." Her voice was quieter than usual. "Rachel, honey, can we talk?" I didn't speak. She continued, "I think I made things harder for you than I realized." Still, I stayed silent. Not out of pettiness, out of shock. My mother does not do accountability. It's like trying to microwave salad, unnatural and inevitably messy. She sighed, a small, tired sound. "I'm sorry." 2 words I'd waited half my life to hear. She added, "I didn't see how much you were carrying. I think I just expected you to be fine." A part of me wanted to forgive her right then. Another part wanted to scream. Instead, I said, "We'll figure it out, but it's going to take time." She whispered, "I know." After we hung up, I cried, not out of sadness, but release. Tears that had been waiting behind a dam for years finally found the cracks. A couple of days later, Tyler tried calling me, then texting, then calling again. When I didn't respond, he sent a long paragraph about how things got blown out of proportion and how he didn't mean to actually hurt anyone. He wanted to talk like adults. I almost laughed. The man forged my name, tried to steal thousands, and humiliated me in front of 120 people. But sure, let's talk like adults. I blocked him. Later that week, Mr. Foster requested to meet at a local cafe. I showed up expecting awkward small talk and maybe a "sorry, my son's an idiot" speech. Instead, he handed me a sealed envelope with an official logo. "He's facing charges," he said calmly, watching my face like he didn't know whether I'd be horrified or satisfied. Honestly, I felt neither. I felt clarity. I told him, I don't hate him, but I'm done letting him walk over me. Mr. Foster nodded like he understood that sentiment more deeply than he'd admit. "I should have stopped him years ago," he said softly. "You're the first person who didn't let him talk his way out of it." There was no pride in his voice, only regret. Before we parted ways, he said something that stuck with me. "Strength doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like a woman not picking up a phone." That night, I finally called my boyfriend, Mateo, and told him everything. Every detail I'd swallowed, every embarrassment, every fear. I expected irritation or judgment or even insecurity, especially since his ex, Selena, had been circling his socials like a vulture sensing weakness. But Mateo just listened, quiet and present, and warm in the way only he can be. When I finished, he said, "Rach, you don't have to go through any of that alone." I laughed through a sniffle. "I didn't want to dump it all on you." "Dump it," he said. "I'm not a paper cup." And when he said that, something clicked. This was what it felt like to be safe. In the weeks that followed, my life didn't magically turn perfect. But it changed. In real, grounded ways. Lacey and I started texting again. Not about money, not about panic, but about podcasts and thrift finds and weird customers she met at work. Mom began visiting me only after asking permission first, which still feels surreal and weirdly sweet. And I started saying the word no like it belonged to me. Because it does. Looking back, the party wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of me finally choosing myself. It's strange how life settles after chaos. Quietly, almost politely, like it's embarrassed by the mess it made. A few months after the engagement party disaster, I started noticing tiny changes in my days. Not fireworks, not movie montage miracles, just steadiness. A kind of peace I didn't realize I'd been starving for. I remember sitting on my porch one Sunday morning, wrapped in an old hoodie that Mateo stole from his college roommate years ago, sipping coffee from a travel mug because all my real mugs were still in the sink. The neighborhood was waking up. Someone mowing too early, a golden retriever trotting proudly with a stick 3 times its size, kids selling lukewarm lemonade for $1.50 a cup. Regular life, soft life. And for the first time in forever, I felt like I belonged in it. Mom texted me a picture of a new shelf she built for her kitchen. "Look, I used a level this time." And I laughed out loud, because if you knew my mom, you'd know that's character development. Lacey sent me a screenshot of her dating apps, asking, "Which one of these dudes seems least like a red flag disguised as a TED Talk?" And I thought, damn, maybe we're all learning. Maybe the generational curse is finally bending, even just an inch. Sometimes I think about Tyler, not in a vengeful way, more like how you think about a tornado that ripped through your street. You don't obsess over it, but you acknowledge it shaped the layout of your house now. Last I heard, he was working with a lawyer and doing some mandatory counseling. Classic rich guy rehab arc, but honestly, if he comes out of it a better human, good for him. If not, that's his burden to carry, not mine anymore. What surprised me most was the way people treated me afterward. Folks from work who barely knew my name suddenly opened up, telling me their own stories, bad marriages, family debt, siblings who drained them dry. Turns out, once someone sees you stand up for yourself, it makes them wonder if maybe they can do the same. One of my coworkers, Denise, a mother of 3 who never takes a lunch break, whispered to me one day, "You gave me the push to finally tell my ex he can't just drop the kids last minute every time he feels like partying." She looked terrified and proud at the same time, and I swear, it made my whole week. Even my bank advisor, this older woman named Candace who wears bright lipstick and calls everyone sweetheart, told me I should be proud of how I handled the fraud situation. She said, "Most folks freeze when their trust is broken. You redirected." And that word stuck with me. Redirected. Like pain is energy, and you get to choose whether it burns you down or fuels you forward. Mateo and I grew closer too, not in a dramatic we moved in together instantly and adopted a rescue cat named Biscuit way. More like calm, steady closeness. The kind where you can sit in silence without feeling like you need to perform. Where he reaches for your hand at red lights without thinking. Where he remembers your favorite creamer flavor without being asked. I didn't realize how much I needed softness until I finally let myself have it. One night, lying in bed with the ceiling fan humming above us, he said, "You know, people think self-worth is loud. Big speeches, big decisions. But sometimes it's just choosing not to answer a call." I laughed into his shoulder, because that man will never let me forget that line. But he's right. Boundaries aren't walls, they're doors. And I finally found the knob. I won't pretend everything is perfect. I still flinch sometimes when my phone rings unexpectedly. I still overthink before saying no, like I'm breaking some unspoken family contract. But now I catch myself, breathe, and try again. Healing isn't a straight line. It's a messy, looping scribble that somehow moves forward. The biggest shift, though, is something quieter. A thought that visits me in grocery store aisles, on long drives, during slow moments at work. I didn't deserve what happened, but I did deserve what came after. The support, the peace, the dignity, the freedom. And maybe that's the real takeaway. Not that justice was served in some dramatic, cinematic way, but that I stopped letting other people decide what I get to carry. If someone asked me now what lesson I learned from all of it, I'd say this. People will take and take and take until you finally put your hands back in your pockets. Forgiveness means letting go. Boundaries mean staying whole. And justice, real justice, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a slow reclaiming of your own life. A couple of weeks ago, I ran into Mr. Foster at the grocery store. He was buying cereal like a man who hadn't read a nutrition label in 20 years. We talked for a few minutes, small talk mostly. Before leaving, he looked at me and said, "You changed more than you realize." I didn't know what he meant at first. Then I understood. He wasn't talking about me. He was talking about the ripples. Because when someone finally stands up, even quietly, other people notice. Other people learn. Other people choose differently. When I drove home that day, windows down, radio playing old throwback hits, I felt lighter. Not because life got easier, but because I wasn't dragging dead weight anymore. And if there's one thing I'll carry with me for the rest of my life, it's this. You don't have to roar to reclaim your power. Sometimes all it takes is a single moment of saying, "This ends with me." Looking back on everything that happened, I've realized that life has a quiet way of teaching us lessons we weren't brave enough to seek on our own. For years, I let myself believe that enduring disrespect was the same as keeping the peace. I thought staying silent made me strong, or loyal, or the bigger person. But the truth is, silence can become its own kind of prison if you hold it long enough. What happened with my family, and with Tyler, forced me to see that standing up for yourself isn't an act of aggression, it's an act of self-respect. And trust me, self-respect takes practice. I've learned that the people who care about you will step up when the truth comes out, and the ones who don't? Well, their absence is its own kind of blessing. You reap what you sow. Turns out that's not just something folks say at Sunday cookouts. It's a reminder that accountability eventually finds its way home, one way or another. Most of all, I learned that your worth isn't defined by the roles you've been pushed into: fixer, peacemaker, provider, punching bag. Your worth is defined by the courage to choose yourself, even when it's messy, even when it's scary, even when people you love don't understand at first. And once you take that first step, the world has a way of opening up in front of you. If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you of a moment you found your own voice, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your experiences in the comments, hit the like button if the message resonated, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories filled with emotion, justice, and real-life reflection. Wishing you peace, clarity, and a little more light on the path ahead.